Hey everybody, this is Keith Gleason, host of Indie Comics Relay, creator of the Mighty Mascots, and promoter for the Plastic City Comic Con. Yeah, I have another panel that I was a part of that I wanted to come on here and introduce real quick. So this panel, I was asked to moderate, my first time moderating a panel for the Wicked Comic Con 2024, which happened about a month ago at this time. And I think the reason they asked me is because it was a panel about all ages comics. So I got to moderate and talk with some great creators. Shout out to my cameraman, Jorge Medina, which you may know from Catch the Craze, and also does an all ages book called Wonder Duck. And the panel guests were awesome. We had Todd DeZago on the panel, who you might know from Telos, Young Justice, Spider-Man, Perhapanauts with Craig Rousseau. We had Peter Wartman, who is the artist on the Avatar, The Last Airbender comics, and has been doing a bunch of those for the last few years. We had Gene Atchison, who is a former school teacher, who is now a co-writer on Vampirella and is also doing some all ages projects. And then finally, Tom Snagowski, who is done, the Atomic Frenchie. He's worked on Bone with Jeff Smith, and he actually is a writer with Gene. And they're great. I finally got to meet them at this show, and wonderful creators all around. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this panel. One thing I also got to mention is the microphones were not working on the day that we recorded. So George tried to get the sound as best he could, and we tried to pump it up with the editing. We got it up a high enough, but I also subtitled it just in case, because sometimes it's just too hard to hear. And so hopefully you'll still stick around for the whole thing. It's actually a very good panel. We talk about some very good things in comics and with all ages in particular. So, all right, without further ado, enjoy the panel. Thanks for joining us, all ages fans, I'm sure. We got a great panel of creators here. My name's Keith Gleason. I am also an all ages creator. I have a book called Mighty Mascots. The guy filming for me, he's an all ages creator. He has a book called Wonder Duck. And then these wonderful creators here. We'll start from left to right here. Introduce yourself to the audience here.
Am I on the left?
Yeah. And tell us what books you worked on.
Telos is one of the books I worked on.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Todd DeZago. I've been in comics for about 30 years, which seems really long to me. I started out working on X-Men and Spider-Man and things like that, and learned Marvel stuff. And then I went on to create a comic book called Telos, which is a high-adventure fantasy with talking animals and magic and good versus evil. And it was drawn by the amazing Mike Waringo, who sadly passed away 16 years ago. But anyway, it is an all-ages book. It's a lot of fun. We just had it reprinted by Image so that everybody can see it. I also do another book with my friend Craig Rousseau, whose name you might hear again on this panel, we created a comic book called The Perhapanauts, which is an all-ages book, and it's about a group of secret agents that go out looking for the weird creatures that are supposed to be out in the world, like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, the Loch Ness Monster. But the team is also made up of a Chupacabra, Bigfoot, a Mothman, and a ghost. So it's a lot of fun. Things go wrong a lot, so it's sometimes funny. That's all I have to say.
I'm Peter Wortman. I've done some creator-owned things, something called Stonebreaker, which is this fantasy story about a girl exploring this abandoned city. But maybe more notably, I've been working on the Avatar comics for since 2017, however long that's been. And I've written a little bit for Dragon Prince. So I've done a lot of licensed work that's kind of in the all ages area. That's basically what I've done.
Nice.
Hi, my name is Janine Atchison. I am a middle school teacher turned comic book writer, thanks to my writing partner, Tom Snagowski. We have written together Vampirella comics for Dynamite, and we're also working on an all-ages graphic novel that we can't talk about yet because they haven't announced it. But that's our all-ages thing, and I've been doing this for about almost 5 years, and can't wait for the next 20.
We'll see if you last that long. I'm Tom Smigoski. I've written just about everything. I've worked for just about every publisher. As far as middle grade stuff, I've done a lot of middle grade novels, but I also did some graphic novels. I've worked with Jeff Smith on Bone. I'm the only writer that has worked on Bone with Jeff. My series, The Atomic Frenchie, that was from a couple of years ago. And Young Hellboy, which could kind of be considered middle grade. Yeah, I've done Young Hellboy. And that's...
And do you want to talk about your upcoming?
I might as well. I'm doing, and Young Hellboy is with Craig Russo, but so is the Herculoids, based on the old 1967 cartoon show that I'm writing, and with Craig as the artist on the book. So
I can't wait.
Cannot wait for that book. Awesome.
Super excited.
Yeah, that's a dream project.
Yeah,
that's
for
awesome.
sure.
Big round of applause for these guys. I'll start off with a couple questions to get the conversation going, and then we'll open it up to the audience as well here. So I wanted to ask all of you guys, what attracts you guys to the all-ages material compared to other genres, let's say? Is there a specific reason that you guys like to work with all ages, or?
Left to right again?
Yeah, let's do left to right.
Still on the left?
Or we can
Still on the left. I think that there is, and I've realized this just recently, there is a desire on my part to kind of recreate the joy and the thrill that I had when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. I want to be able to provide that to this generation of kids who are doing that. So whenever I was writing Spider-Man, I was leaning towards more of the fun stuff that I remembered. I did that when Mike and I decided to create Telos. We wanted it to be something that everybody could get into and enjoy, and we were told that it was read as bedtime stories to kids at that time. I forgot to mention that in 2010, I wrote a comic book for Marvel called The Superhero Squad, which was based on a cartoon show. And the Superhero Squad, I would take and I would do 11-page stories, and parents would come to me and say, they are just the right length for a bedtime story. These were great. And I did it for a little over a year, and I still have kids now who read them then, are now in their 20s and 30s or whatever, and they come up and say, oh, we love those stories when we were kids. And they were just silly, I call it playground humor. A lot of just silly, stupid things, but lots of fun. And it's nice to be able to get that, be able to recreate that. Sorry, I talked too much.
Yeah, so initially I think it's more sort of just what I fell into, because in some ways that is what's being made these days. It's sort of like, if you're doing comics, you're probably going to be doing something in like the middle grade range, or maybe YA if you're lucky. But even then, like, it's still, there is something about it it's fun to kind of write stories that can be, read by kids, like you said, sort of something you would like want to read when you're growing up, or something that's going to kind of like impact somebody. I don't know, that's just sort of an exciting thing to think about. So yeah. So I can think of that. Yeah.
I think what draws me to middle grade or to all ages writing is that I remember, I have kids and they're grown now, but I remember reading with them at night before bed. And it was always good for me and always fun for me when they'd get something out of it, but I would get something out of it too. So if there's like maybe, jokes that the kids might not get, but the adults will go, oh, that's clever, I like that. I think that is, something that we try to put into what we're writing. And the book that the graphic novel we're currently working on by the publisher has said, we picture this as something that a parent and a child can read before they go to bed at night, and they just appreciate it together. So I think that's what draws me.
Like that classic all ages thing. Yeah. I know that's like a trap you fall. What kind of book is it? Oh, it's for all ages. So it's tough, but at the same time, I think it's a nice way to present something. That way you're not saying, oh, it's for middle grade, which immediately takes your brain and you go, oh, it's for younger kids.
Yeah.
So I really, maybe I don't want to look at that.
Right.
Like Bone appeals to everybody. And Bone is a classic example of middle grade. But I think also with young adult readers, it allows you to get in touch with your inner goof. You can be stupid. You can be silly. You can, and I think you can't do that a lot if you're writing vampirella. Right. We can't be goofy when we're writing vampirella.
Yeah, I don't see that.
So I think it's like an excuse to be silly, an excuse to be light, and just kind of be imaginative, like just we were writing something recently, and she said something like, "Oh, what about this?" And I'm like, "It's magic. Don't worry." So with that type of subject matter, you can accept that as your result. So
I agree. And like I find too, like with all ages, like when I present my book to people, like I always have to kind of explain what I mean by all ages. Like, because well, it's not like kiddie, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but it's more like Batman the Animated Series. Like I always kind of classify. So all ages is kind of like that, runs that gamut.
Yeah, so it's all over the place.
It is. It
really is. I mean, you got to think like the old Warner Brothers cartoons. I always thought of it as all ages.
Yeah.
They were jokes that the kid was definitely not getting. Yeah. So you kind of cover all.
Whenever somebody talks about that dichotomy of having something that the adults put, the old Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon.
Oh, for sure.
The cartoon was for the kids, the narration was for the adults, and you would sit there going, oh yeah, as a kid, you'd sit there going, oh yeah, that's funny, this is a funny cartoon. But when you listen to it as an adult, you're like, wow, this was all going on when I wrote the double entendre.
Yeah. Even most recently with that Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, they snuck in so many horror references.
Right.
It was ridiculous.
Right.
And I was just like, oh my God. I loved it. I loved every minute.
Not to keep talking, but I'm going to keep talking.
Yeah, go for it.
In the Paraponauts, we created our Chupacabra is kind of the Bart Simpson of the team. And when things go wrong, he's got the mentality of like a 7-year-old. A Chupacabra is the Latin American legend of a vampire. It is technically a vampiric creature that is from their culture. But Chupi, in our book, hates vampires. And everybody tries to point out, you are a vampire. And he's like, no, he's not hearing it. So that's, you get to have that kind of fun stuff. I had a kid who's probably 8 years old come up and was at a convention, came up and was fixated on that idea and kept saying to me, he doesn't know he's a vampire. And I was like, I wrote this. I know that. But even the kid didn't understand that I had created this. He just thought that story is there and I was here representing it somehow. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Another question I was going to ask you guys is like, do you guys have all ages titles that you like personally or like to share with your family or anything like that? That you currently read or have read that you really like? Or
I don't really care for all ages. At the moment, no, there's not. I kind of fell out, and I'm getting back into it. I'm doing a podcast now, and I have to be aware of what current comics things are going on, trying to appeal to a larger group, which means I need to start reading comics again and be part of it. So I've gone into the store, and there's just so much on the walls.
Yeah.
I'm having several people kind of advise me of what the great comics are now, so I will be coming to your table to pick up some of your books.
And Todd, if you want to just let people know what your podcast is, that would be great.
It's called Random Acts of Comics. I've been doing it now for a couple of months. It's getting pretty good reviews. I'm having people on to talk about their careers a little bit, but also, what's your favorite comic? What's your favorite comic book panel? What's the funniest thing you ever saw in a comic? What's the best fight you ever saw? So we talk about fun stuff that you used to talk about when you were 8, 9, 10 years old as well. And hearing some people have to think about that is, to me, hilarious. Because a couple of people I've really caught on the spot. I asked Mark Waid what his favorite panel was, and he wanted to punch me. And the other thing is when you talk to people and say, what's your favorite comic? They go, you mean today? Like right now?
Right.
Because they have other people have so many that they go, maybe it's this, no, maybe it's this, oh wait, maybe, I'll be back. So it seems like I've found a good niche for it. So Random Acts of Comics drops every Monday.
Cool.
Sorry, thank you for letting me.
We're talking about all ages comics you like a lot? Yeah. I mean, you start bringing a bone, honestly. That's been kind of that feels like it's just really good comics. Like, especially if you're kind of like introducing someone to like how comics work, like a young reader or something. I feel like it's a great place to start. Even like someone who doesn't really like comics a lot, I feel like it's a good entry point. I feel like I'm kind of like underselling it a little bit here, but it's yeah, I don't know. That's always the one I just go to first. So yeah,
that's a great one.
That's the one I got in my mind. So I'm put you on the spot now.
I'm going to steal that, though. I think
Okay,
Bones
yeah.
probably one. I was fortunate enough to see some of the scripts, actually all of the scripts, before they went into the newest book that came out in last September, written by Tom, of course. And it really is. It's funny because I can picture Tom, and I have known each other for a really long time, but I can picture him as the high schooler that he was, like being excited about this. And yeah, it just kind of, that's a really good one, I think.
Yeah, that's a top of the
Bone is, I don't know, it's like the gateway. That's a perfect example. I've had people come up to me and they look at the cover and they'll say, well, tell me about this. Like, and it's almost like a little bit of almost like a condescending attitude, like they don't know anything about Bone. And I said, all right, imagine this. It's Lord of the Rings mixed with the Warner Brothers cartoon, and that usually their eyes kind of get big, and that just fascinates them.
Yeah. And I think there is something fun about that too, because the comic will kind of escalate from being like a Warner Brothers cartoon.
Yeah,
and
it's such a slow build, but it's so.
It almost takes you off guard.
Yeah,
like completely. Yeah. Like you think you know what you're reading, but you don't know what you're reading. Yeah. By the time you're getting towards the end of the original.
I'm still astounded it's not an animated film or a series.
You could hear the stories of
I know.
What Jeff has been through with that. It's a nightmare.
I bet once it finally happens, it'll be like unbelievable.
I know. Once it happens.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Those are great choices. I'll do one more question and open it up to you guys here. What do you think the role of all ages plays into the overall comic industry? Is that like... you think it's like a corner pin,
Let me start.
Like,
I think it's like the gateway drug. It's almost like it teaches them that you could read something and enjoy it, and you hope that it goes beyond comics. Which is, if they just read comics, that's fine too. But I think it expands your literary choices. I think when you read Bone. And then somebody, hey, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings. Well, hey, what's this Lord of the Rings? I'll read Lord of the Rings. I think it just kind of broadens your choices. It makes them want to read. I think that's
huge.
That's enormous.
And seeing the look on their faces.
When it's not, I don't have to. This is in school. I'm reading for enjoyment. Yes. It's almost like you have to teach them how to read for enjoyment.
Yep. Yeah, that's do you have anything there?
Yeah, as a former middle school teacher, I was constantly trying to get my kids to read. Girls were, and I don't mean to be sexist, but girls were probably a little more willing to read things than boys. And I always kept copies of comics in my classroom. When Diary of a Wimpy Kid came out, I was like, not so sure. But honestly, it got my kids reading.
Yeah.
I had boys come in to the library in the morning, and they would talk about the books. Talk about the books, and that was just amazing. Some of the kids went on to read other things, I like this story. Well, if you like this Diary of a Wimpy Kid, here's a similar story that's all prose, maybe like that. So it's a gateway.
Yeah.
Anything that can spark their imagination or spark their love of reading is is just so beneficial for them.
Now it's
For
more
every-
Dogman too.
Yeah, Dogman.
Yeah.
I think Dogman is like, when you like look at the breakdown of like.
It's like the
comics,
biggest one, right?
It's like Dogman is like 40%, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah,
you know, like-
yeah, it's
Yeah.
wild, right?
And that was Captain Underpants.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was
The same
before-
guy, right?
Yeah,
The
same
same guy,
guy.
yeah.
Doesn't he have a cat one too, or something?
I think there is a Captain.
Yeah, Cat Boy or something. I can't keep up with those animal characters.
He broke the code.
He did.
We're all just kind of like trying to find our own place. But, yeah.
Peter, anything to add?
I mean, I guess I'm thinking about like, with all the ages from middle grade, or like, when I think about like Avatar, for example, or Boom, like you have the story that can kind of be approached on a, like it's got that simple, enjoyable, these like wacky characters and stuff, but these are also stories that have a deeper kind of, you know, background going on, or even more complicated kind of things.
Mythology.
Yeah, like,
More
like
going
Avatar is a story about this kid who's like, you know, doing all these goofy things, but also there's like genocide and stuff happening. Like there's more, you kind of get into these deeper kind of questions, and I think it can kind of be a good way, like as a kid grows up, they can kind of find these more interesting things in it and kind of grow with them, you know. Like, and I think that's kind of something that I'm interested in figuring out how to do with the stories that I want to write too, you know. Like how do you make something that is both approachable but also deep? And that's kind of can be an interesting line to walk. So yeah. This is like, kind of like going off the question a little bit, but
Yeah, but no. I was going to bring up something like that
Sure.
too eventually. But, how about you, Todd? Anything to add to that?
I think that as we're all talking about that, first of all, thank you for getting kids in school involved. I think that the big thing that I've seen over the course of the time that I've been in comics is that less and less kids are reading comics, and we don't have a way to really get them to the kids. It used to be when I was a kid, there was a spinner rack by the door, or it was an impulse item. Mom, can I have a quarter for a comic book? Now they're $5 each, and they're inaccessible. If you want a comic book, you have to go to a comic book store, and kids aren't doing that. We've kind of lost that level of comic books being something that are ubiquitous. They're not everywhere. Kids see the Marvel movies and they go, they don't say, oh, I need the comic book. They see, I want to see the other Marvel movies. There's just not a lot. David Peterson, who does Mouse Guard, did the keynote speech of the Ringo Awards 5 years ago, where he said, we, as a comic book community, should be reaching out and trying to reach out not just to kids, but to other people to say, you know what, there are so many different genres of comic, there are so many different styles and types of comic out there, that I'm sure there's something out there that would appeal to you. We all have friends who go, comics, I can't read them, I don't know what's going on, I can't follow them. Something like Bone is so easy to follow, no one can say, I can't follow this. My mom would read my comic books. She would try to, but she really didn't know how to read the panels sequentially. And I was working with, on one hand, Mike Wieringo, who was so fluid, my mom could not follow it. But then I was also working with some people who just didn't have the storytelling abilities, and my mom would say, I'm lost, I'm confused. But I do think that we as an industry need to find better ways to appeal to the next generation, or else comics are going to go away. And there are such great comics out there. I blanked before when you were talking about the comics that are really great, but my friend Jamar Nichols does a comic book called Leon, which is really great. I remember reading, John Gallagher does the Cat, I don't think it's Cat Boy, I think it's something else. But Dogman, now I'm going to blank on them, I'm going to forget. There are a lot of comics out there that are being appealed to kids through Scholastic and some of these places, but we should try to get comics into kids' hands. The room filled up with people, and I didn't realize that I attracted so many people like that. Also, that guy came in with his gun, and I went, holy shit, what is happening?
Conventions.
But yeah,
Awesome.
And so anyway, that was my, I'm sorry I take so long to talk.
Do you know how often I've had somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, they still make comics?"
Yeah,
Bring that up.
That's a nightmare.
I used to do this.
I feel my soul die.
But I also get and you guys might get this too, that like they're so happy when they come to your table because you have something
Yeah.
for their kids, and
Yeah.
usually they're like, I walk around this whole show and I don't find anything for my kids, and that is like a great thing to have too, you know. I think is it ready to go, Pat? Or?
Find it out.
All right, I wanted to open up the questions.
That one works.
Is it?
Yeah.
Let's go. Turn off and hello. Can you guys? Is that working? Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I was going to come down to the audience to see if anyone has anyone have a question for the panel. Yeah, come down there. Hello. Hello. Yeah, there we go. All right. Ask them a question.
Thank you. So one question is how you all got your starts, but also how things have changed for someone trying to get their start today. Maybe if you could touch on that a little bit. That come through?
You guys hear that okay? He wants to know how you guys all started in the industry and how someone breaking in today, how they would go about it. How things would change. There you go.
So I'm going to name drop like crazy because I know everybody. But Mark Wade was on my podcast a little while ago. He and I have been friends for almost 30 years. And we were talking about getting into comics. I got into comics because a friend of mine had gotten in at Marvel, and I didn't want to ride his coattails because he's an idiot. But because, so I kept sending in my stuff to DC Comics. And sure enough, I went with this guy into Marvel offices one day. I met one of the editors. They said, "Oh, you want to write? Why don't you submit something?" And it just worked out that way. Nowadays, Marvel offices won't let you in. They won't let anybody in. So Mark and I realized that every single person who got into comics in one way or another, they immediately realized, oh, there's an opening, and they slammed that door and said, "That you'll never get in that way again." So I don't know if there's anyone who will tell you, "Oh, I got in this way, you should try it." They'll say, "I got in this way, don't do that." It is just so random. It is so crazy, and everybody has a different story for it, as these people will also tell you.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, like I got into comics around 2010, when webcomics were kind of like a different thing in some ways. So like I was just doing this create our own thing called Stonebreaker. I was putting it out there. The writer on Stonebreaker, on the Avatar comics saw it, she liked it, and I think that's how I got that job. I just got an email one day. It's hard to say, but like for a long time I would tell people like, "Oh yeah, that's the way to do it. Like write your own thing, put it out there in the web. It's really easy. You know, people can find it. You'll make connections." But now social media is dead. Basically, that whole avenue's gone. So kind of what you said, like. The way I got into comics is no longer really a thing anymore. So I think that just kind of keeps happening. So the way you get into comics is you figure out how to do it. I think like that's kind of really the only answer that makes any sense. Like 'cause it's always going to be different. It's always changing completely with every like new generation of cartoonists. So that's the annoying answer that I think is true. You know?
It always comes back to just making comics, right?
I mean, you got to make comics. I think that is the one thing that happens.
Yeah, you gotta learn the skill.
It's reading
before
it,
you
but it's
can,
not.
you know.
But then figure out how are people getting it out these days, because it's always different. But
It is, yeah.
And if you are looking to get into comics, also have a plan B.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you
Oh,
don't.
fun.
It is. You need to know how to network. You need to know how to interact. Tom is really good at talking to people and finding work. I am not good at that. You seem to be working a lot better more than I do.
I guess
which is great.
I will say, like, we're kind of getting off the topic, but just on comics. One good thing about comics is if you do comics, you know how to do a lot of different things because you're a writer, you're an artist, you're a designer, you're a communicator on some level. Like you have to promote your stuff, right? So you have the skills to do all these other jobs that aren't maybe comics So there's always other things you can be doing to kind of keep things going. Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, only creating is half the job, right?
Right.
Half
Yeah,
is
yeah.
doing all the stuff you don't like social media.
Right.
and all that
Yeah, I
fun
mean, all those
stuff.
skills, they're applicable in different places, so.
Yeah.
Comics don't always pay the bills. That's what I'm saying. That I was fortunate enough to learn carpentry, and I have two friends who are carpenters. And if when Marvel went bankrupt, for example, my one friend came in and said, "Come on over, we're building stairs." And I was like, "All right."
That's comics,
I
yeah.
needed to have other things to fall back on and do it. And to this day, he'll still call me up, and I'll spend months. Craig will tell you how much I'm not working in the last couple of months because I've just been working on the podcast. And we have a brand new cabinet that's being built in Woodstock, New York that I am at. It really looks great. I can show you pictures. Sorry. I'm talking.
Gene or Tom?
I think my story is probably the most
Odd.
odd and fantastical one. I taught middle school English for 15 years, and I had always been thinking in the back of my head, I'm going to retire, and I need to do it soon, but I didn't want to just retire. I needed something else. So in 2019, I was working on a new unit with my students, and I needed an author who had a book made into a movie, because that's what the unit was about. And I remembered my good friend Tom from high school, and so I emailed him and I said, "Hey, would you come to talk to my 307th graders?" And he said, "Sure."
What's it pay?
Yes, we did. And we started talking again once we reconnected, and we never stopped. And then it was right before the pandemic, very long story short, we wrote a novel together, and then Tom said, "Would you like to write a comic with me?" And I was like, at this point, sure, why not?
You had no idea what you
No idea what I was getting into. And that was several comics ago. That was in 2021. I retired, and we do this full time now together. So I kind of fell in ass backwards. But
That's the only way to do it.
very recently, yeah. And I don't think honestly, I thank my lucky stars, because I have not had so much fun in such a long time. So as far as advice for people, I don't know. If you have a Tom that you can call, that's great.
Oh, no, there's
But not him.
That goes back to the point Todd was saying, though. There's not
Yeah.
one way of getting in.
Yeah, like even I could say, like I was writing, I had just started writing short fiction, like short stories, on the verge of trying out my first novel, something like that. And I had met an artist by the name of Steve Bissett, who drew Swamp Thing for DC, and he's an amazing guy, really amazing. And he had read one of my short stories, and he said, "Hey, I'm putting together an anthology of horror short illustrations."
Taboo. Oh my God, work on that? That's
He
great.
said, "How would you like to be?" I'm in the very first Taboo. He said, "How would you like to adapt your story for Taboo?" I had no idea how to script a comic at that point. I worked with an artist named Mike Hoffman, and he kind of showed me how to go about doing that. And what was interesting is that I think I had read comics forever, had gigantic collections, but had never made the connection that you could write comics. I was strictly writing books and writing short fiction and stuff like that. And it was like, well, wait, I could write these too?
Yeah.
It was just like a disconnect.
Yeah.
And after that initial story that was in Taboo, I started pitching ideas to a lot of black and white, small black and white. It was around the time of the Mutant Turtles and stuff like that. So there were all kinds of these little black and white companies popping up, and that's where I started. I just slowly climbed up, and then I ended up at Paris doing Vampirella in the 90s.
Oh, no wonder you guys are back.
And now I'm back to Vampirella again, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the time, the late 80s. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean,
remember being a fan.
Yeah, well, there were comics coming out of people's living room.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people were making comics in their kitchen.
The number of books being sold,
Yeah.
I can't even,
Yeah.
if they came out today, would be top 10 books,
Yeah.
It's like crazy.
Yeah, just
Magical time.
you could literally go through the Diamond or Diamond Preview. What was the other one? there were two.
Yeah, there was another
There was two distributors at that
forget
time.
what the other one was. The Marvel one?
Marvel's later. But Marvel bought the second.
Yeah.
I forget what their name was.
Yeah, I forget.
But you could go through those two order books, and there were like hundreds and hundreds of publishers, and your chances of reaching out to one of these guys maybe would say, yeah, what do you got? You know, that type of thing. I mean, you didn't make any money, but you do comics.
I always think too that the Diamond Count is such a challenge for new readers. Like you hand them this like phone book.
You hand them a phone book every month.
Like, what do I do with this? You know, it's like, you know. So that's another thing that's like hurting the industry too. It's like there's not a good way to find comics, you know. But anyone's gonna come on.
Hopefully you guys are, all right, hopefully you guys are ready for this. Sometimes I ask hard questions, but I'm going to make this one kind of
Speak up in case the microphone is everywhere.
You guys can hear me? Yeah,
Oh,
okay,
it's
so,
a little loud.
Yeah, a little high. Oh, there you go.
so, you know, it's really interesting. Comics is more like an American culture, and Japan's got this whole manga culture. And America's, you know, being influenced a lot by anime and manga, and even their sections that do anime. I feel the pressure about a different kind of culture that kind of, you know, now, you know, part of America now, that kind of like has this influence. There's a back and forth. Does it feel like there's, you've got a generation moving to anime and manga away from American comics? Because it's really interesting. You know, when we talk about when I talk about comics with my kids and my family or friends, comics and cartoons is a terminology I use with the comics, but anime and manga is different, right? So how do you feel that the influences are, and do you feel any pressure or competition from that side?
There's definitely a competition.
Hey, Tom, let's answer it together.
Yeah, there's definitely a competition.
Between anime and
I get angry. I'm like, you know, it's like I love the fact that they're reading and you know they're reading anime, or watching anime and reading manga comics. I love that, but at the same time, there's all this really cool stuff over there that they're missing, that they're not looking at. And that kind of I would love the bridge. I would love to find the thing that's the bridge that allows, you know, a comic fan to enjoy all of it, as opposed to just one thing.
Yeah, or just getting stuck in one
Yeah,
side.
well, and honestly, like a lot of kids that I've talked to that are like manga fans, they don't want to talk about anything else. They don't want to see anything else. That's what they want, and they don't want to look at it. I'm waving Wolverine at them.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then, no, this is what I want.
I can tell you one thing I see that manga has over Western comics is the amount of content you get for
Yes.
money is so much better
Yep.
on the manga side.
Yep.
You get a 300-page book for
Yep.
$10, whereas a 32-page comic is $5.
Yeah,
So
I
that
know.
doesn't make sense to me. But
Yeah, I'm actually someone who came from the manga side, like
Oh, did you
read
really?
a lot of like Otomo and some Kira books, like Miyazaki did a bunch of stuff too. Like all that stuff, I was very kind of like that's kind of how I came into the comics world, and even Avatar itself, like it's a Western cartoon, but it's heavily anime influenced, right? And it's kind of like one of the first waves of that. I think going forward, there is just going to be a blending of those two things, because like everyone kind of like, you know, the upcoming generations of artists are going to be influenced by a lot of manga and by a lot of, you know, Western comics. I think that's just the way it is. Yeah,
I do wish there was a way to mix them together, like is what you were kind of saying, like with the.
Really, it's how do you feel the influences of Japanese culture kind of, I don't know, feels like invading, or even because it's like, again, there's a disunity. There's a disunity between the different cultures.
There are like there's like a different like visual language that
Right. Like you when you spoke about Avatar, you called Avatar a cartoon. It's not anime.
And because if you watch that show, there's like a lot of like Nickelodeon kind of cartoon jokes happening, right? It's not all. It doesn't quite have the full like language of anime, but it does have like the fight scenes are very heavily influenced by, maybe like more like Chinese or like Hong Kong and stuff movies. But it's It is interesting watching like the language of manga become much more prevalent in like American, comics and stuff though. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's just going to blend. It's just going to be this like cultural exchange of sorts.
I've seen Marvel and DC try to do the anime thing, and I don't think people like it for some reason, right? Because it's not. It's like usually Spider-Man done as like a manga style or Deadpool. And
X-Men.
right.
There was a whole period of time in the 2000s where X-Men was very manga. That tanked.
Yeah, like it just, I don't know why it doesn't work. I don't feel like I'm in competition with them, even though I know that they're kind of.
But it could be like what I said though. That's not manga. I don't want to look at that. That's
right. It's like
this is manga. This is what I want.
Yeah.
There seems to be a real line.
But I think part of what I heard was there's a sense that comics are dying, right? And could that be because that generation is moving over to manga?
It could very well be that. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids aren't reading as much
anymore.
I think I mean, like you think like when we were growing up, there's a lot more to read, and now there's phones, there's video, there's everything. And you hand a kid a comic, it's so archaic now. Like it's like
they have to work.
They have to work to read it. Yeah, exactly.
Use their imagination.
Exactly. And there's still a lot of parents though that look for all ages stuff.
Yeah.
How about anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
So you guys work with all ages, so if you ever have to like pare back and be like, oh, this is too adult, this is too like,
all the time. I'm always getting yelled at.
He's always in
how do you
trouble.
deal with that?
I am always in trouble. You went too far,
Synagogue. Vampirella, but then going to something else.
Yeah.
Like it's such a switching of your gears.
Well, especially since I'm kind of tainted, so it's kind of like it's almost like, well, that's not that violent.
Yeah,
it's really violent. You can't do that.
I often use it, and I say this again. I often use Batman animated series as my barometer because, there's some violence in it, but they never show blood. Things like that. Like is how I kind of when I do my.
It's stylistic.
You're
getting away with a lot more due to the style of
Yeah, and like on one of my covers, I had like a dead character, but I told the artist no blood and put X's in his eyes, so it had like a kind of cartoon.
So it becomes more of a joke at that.
Yes, exactly.
Like Avatar, I've always found it to be kind of funny because they're using like the elements instead of the actual just martial arts. So instead of someone getting punched, they like get burned or hit with a giant rock, which is supposed to be somehow that's less violent. But it's I think that there's like you create a distance between like if someone's actually getting punched, that's more real, right? So you do something that's a little more fantastic and then you kind of imply things without actually having to show the actual impact of the violence. And there's always this weird line of also trying not to downplay it too much, I think, because you don't want to have a show for kids saying no violence is fine and no one's gonna get hurt, right? You have to kind of there is an impact, but it can't be something that's scary. It's a weird line of walk,
When I worked on Spider-Man back in the 90s, and I was involved in a big event called the Clone Saga, which at the time was supposed to take 6 issues and ended up taking 2.5 years. And we, as the writers, were desperately trying to end the story. And the salespeople had gotten to editorial, this is the first time that this happened, and said, it's selling like crazy, keep the story going. And we were about to beat up the editor. He eventually got fired, and they brought in somebody who would help us end it. But it was a big thing. But during that Clone Saga era, this is 1996, 97, and we really thought we were putting the biggest stain on the Spider-Man mythology ever. and now it is heralded as one of the greatest events in comic book history. And I have royalty checks to show for it. But they came to us, the editorial at Marvel came to us and said, Marvel Comics is now no longer targeting, their demographic is no longer 8 to 16-year-old boys. It is now 14 to 35-year-old men. So the whole shift was, we are now writing a more adult story for a more adult crowd. And we said, what does that mean? What should and what can we do? The Comics Code Authority sticker that nobody really paid attention to, that was still there. They were still going to abide by it. So I do remember us kind of playing around, myself and Tom DeFalco and Howard Mackey especially. The three of us were always talking like, how much extra violence can we bring in? What more can we do? And I know I went way overboard just to see if I could get them to come in and give us a little more. I did it on purpose. I sent in this incredibly violent episode where we had this villain who was just killing people, and it was gory. I've used some of the stuff later on in other books, but they came in and said, this is too much. And I went, good.
Now I know.
Where's the line? Help us find this line. And to this day, those guys will say, we really had to kind of figure out where we could go. And then Marvel came out with some of the more adult lines that they put out. I don't even remember the names of some of them. But just to try to say, these are more adult, more violent. So, again, sorry to ramble on.
I always push the line.
Yeah.
I always try to push the line a little bit.
I did, and you were talking, we brought up the Warner Brothers cartoons. I worked on a comic book called Impulse, which was supposed to be fun and silly. Mark Waid had created Impulse to be able to do all the silly things that he thought of while he was writing The Flash. So Impulse was supposed to be more of a cartoon and more fun. But as DC started to become more and more focused on their demographic, they said no more funny comics. This is a superhero book. And I said, no, it's a sitcom, and it needs to continue to. So I started to do some Bugs Bunny type things. And they said, this is too subversive. This is too. And I said, what do you mean? They said, you have these kids dressing up like girls. And I said, yeah, Bugs Bunny dressed up like a woman all the time. They said, no, that's not, we can't do that. I was like, where are you going? What are you laying out for us? What is okay and what isn't okay? They didn't even know. It went, whoever was talking to you at the time would say, well, you can't do this, but you can do this, whatever.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody have a question out there? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Would you consider making your comics into a cartoon?
Do they consider making their comics into a cartoon? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the time.
I went the other way.
That's right. You talk about a cartoon.
Right. Craig and I have been approached by different agents and different companies. Netflix and Amazon have, at different times, had interest in the Paraponauts to make it into an animated series. At one time, there was somebody talking about making it a live-action movie. And Hollywood is so fickle that they will be excited about it for maybe a month and a half at a time, and then they'll call up and say, the last Reese Witherspoon movie didn't do so well, so we're going to pass on your... what the... It makes no sense. Hollywood makes no sense. So you can get excited about it. Craig and I don't do it anymore. We do have an agent, and we have people who are interested, and we just say, let us know, and we'll see. But we also learned not to do a lot of work for those people until they start paying you money to do the work to do it. I've written treatments for Telos. My other book, Telos, was also looked at many times. That people have just come and said, oh, we'd love to do it. So we would love to see cartoons of our books. I know, same thing. We would love to see it, but Hollywood needs to get on board. That's a great question.
In regard to Hollywood, don't buy the yacht. Don't buy the yacht.
We probably have time for one more. Anyone else have a question out there? Oh, another one.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go ahead. What's your next question?
Can you give me a list of some of the comics you wanna pitch for your cartoons?
Name of what's the ones that they worked on?
That you might want to pitch as cartoons.
I mean, the ones they just mentioned, like Telos, perhaps.
It's all creator-owned. So I wrote Spider-Man for years, and a couple of the things that I wrote as just little lines of dialogue have shown up in the movies. And people, like when Michael Ringo was alive, we got very excited when they mentioned Peter's comic book collection.
Sure, you want to know?
Because we had established that in the book. But, you know, that was all work for hire. I don't get any money for that. I didn't even get mentioned in the credits. I have yet to do that, and I'm dying for that to happen. But it is, if you work for Marvel or DC, the things that I wrote there sometimes will show up in movies or cartoon shows or something. But when you have your own creator-owned licenses, whatever. So I have a creator-owned book called Telos, which is a fantasy book that I did with Michael Ringo. I have the Perhapanauts that I do with Craig Rousseau. I have a couple other creator-owned projects that will be out later next year that if they ever want to make a movie out of it, I'd be there for it. What do you have creator-owned?
I mean, I got my own fantasy comic that would be great to see as a animation at some point, I guess, if I ever finish it.
And its name is
Stonebreaker. Yeah. It's just a webcomic, so it's out there. Yeah, I'm not holding out too much hope for that.
Yeah, they have to come to you. I mean, very rarely do you get to present anything to anybody and have them say, "Oh, I love that." No, they don't want to talk to you. They'll come to you.
Is there any room for network TV to come in, or is it all just streaming now?
I mean, I've seen I know some people got Netflix talking to them and stuff. I don't know anyone who's actually got
Yeah, didn't they shut down their animation?
Yeah.
They had
just years ago.
Yeah, Netflix had a big animation studio and they shut it down. So I mean, I don't know how
Everything's changing.
Yeah, it's changing. But so we're gonna probably wrap it up. Have you guys let them know where they can find you online?
You can find me at a table.
Where you find the show?
At a table downstairs, and all our stuff. All of us are downstairs.
Yeah,
So come and talk to us at the tables. We've enjoyed it. I'm going to say that we've all enjoyed it. All four of us. We've enjoyed this a lot. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know you're just coming for a place to sit down.
Pete, anything you want to?
Yeah, I've got a table. I'm at peterwortman.com. You can find all my stuff there. As recovery.
We're at a table downstairs,
right next to Todd.
right next to Todd. And
Come by, see us.
Yeah.
See what we got.
good books. Buy my book.
Buy my book.
Are you guys in the Galleria or the ballroom?
The ballroom.
We're in the
Ballroom.
Ballroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there's a Galleria.
Yeah, there's a place.
Yeah,
right
I'm in the Galleria. It's great. When it comes to me, I have a comic called Mighty Mascots. It's all ages. But that's it. All right. Can we have a round of applause? Thank you for coming. Thanks for the good questions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.